welcome to the tasting and tour today. We're going to have some fun, and hopefully you'll go away with a good tasting technique. This is very simple. It's not complicated. Wine is very, very simple, but we have to pay attention. We have to practice like everything else. So today I'm going to teach you how to taste. We can spend 2 lifetimes and never know everything about it, but it's not rocket science. And a good wine is quite simply what you like, okay? But in order for it to be good, it has to be well made to start with. So we need balance. A good wine is well balanced, like a good person. The wine between acid, tannins, fruit, and alcohol. You should never taste any of those predominantly over the others. So we're going to do a little technique now. This is a professional tasting glass, and you can see it tapers to the top so that we can capture the aromas of the wine. And we always hold the glass by the stem because we don't want to change the temperature of the wine. So first thing we do is called the first nose. We stick our nose in, try, and we see what we can smell. And then we swirl the wine in the glass like that, because by swirling the wine we're going to release a lot more aromas. And then we do a second nose. Okay, now we can smell many more things coming up, okay, after the swirling. And finally we taste, and I'm going to show you how to taste. We put some wine in our mouths and we move it around in our mouths like we use a mouthwash. In the morning when we brush our teeth, left to right, top to bottom, we chew the wine a bit. And while we have the wine in our mouths, we suck in a bit of air, taking care not to let the wine out when we suck the air in, okay? And the reason that we do that is because on your tongue you only have 5 tastes: sweet, sour, salt, bitter, and umami. Does everyone know what umami is? Umami is a Japanese flavor. It means the essence of deliciousness. It's like the taste of miso soup or the taste of truffles, something like that. It's not definable by sweet, sour, salt, or bitter. It's umami, the essence of deliciousness. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to do this, and then afterwards we can all do it. And it should be an explosion of flavor in your mouths. It doesn't look good or sound good, okay? And that's why I tell young people, if they come to learn about wine with me, not to do it the first time they go and see their future in-laws for dinner, okay? Because it's not pretty. Okay, try it.
Swirl all around the mouth.
All good? Can you feel it all over? Explosion of flavor. Can you still feel it? We call that the finish, okay? So a well-made wine will always have a lovely, long, lingering finish. And we measure that in France in caudalie. We say it is a 30 caudalie finish, which means 30 seconds, okay? Or a 45-second finish. But it's part of the pleasure of having wine. Sometimes you can have a good glass and it has a very cut-off finish. It's like that, but mostly it should have a lovely, long, lingering finish. So I forgot a few things already because I forget things, so that's why Clarissa is here. She is my memory stick. And one of the things I forgot, well, I haven't lost all my marbles, but there's a hole in the bag, okay? So one of the things I forgot to tell you is that we have here 100% Cabernet Sauvignon of Étalon Rouge. We are tasting the 2015. Clarissa is the winemaker, and she was very blessed to have as her mentor for 5 or 6 years the most wonderful winemaker ever, Christian Prudhomme. who also, of course, made wine for Mouton Rothschild, who made wine for Chateau Yquem, and who was in the team that put together Opus One with the Mondavi family and Mouton. So we are very fortunate to have this wine. It is referred to often as the Petrus of this region, not by us, but by other people, and we are very grateful for that. Very small production of only 5,000 or 6,000 bottles, depending on the year. So, are there any questions? Anybody got any questions so far? Okay, and one thing I need you also to, absolutely, there are a few ground rules, okay? Firstly, there are two kinds of wines in the world, French and others, okay? So that you always have to remember. And there are good reasons for that, because you will never ever have consequences the next morning, because French wine is much purer. It's more an art form than New World wines. In New World wines, they're throwing in every possible preservative and all sorts of other funny things. Not all New World wines, of course. We have wonderful ones from California. We have wonderful ones from South Africa and other countries too. So we're going to continue with our lovely morning, experiencing the simple pleasure of tasting wine, and it is a very simple pleasure. And we're going to go on a tour in our little village, and we will take our glasses, because in France it's absolutely permissible. If you did this in the US or in the UK or in my country, in South Africa, you would get arrested. But French people have a great attitude to life, all about pleasure. So we can take our glasses now and head off to see the winery where Étalon Rouge is made, and to increase further our pleasure of tasting. Should we meet a gendarme in the road, don't worry, because if you're carrying a glass of French wine in the street, you're more likely to be in line for the Légion d'honneur than to get any penalty, to get any fine. Okay, so it's going to be perfect. Let's go.
Pollution not driving.
So this is where the lovely Étalon Rouge is made, and it's made in a very special way. Okay, we call it the méthode intégrale, integral method, because wine is a lot like people. It doesn't like violence. Okay, it likes to be treated very gently. And so how we make Étalon Rouge is we don't press or crush the grapes. We put the whole grape into these tanks, and each day for 6 weeks we turn these tanks on wheels, and the weight of the grapes against one another lets the juice descend very slowly, and that's really what the wine likes. Okay, so only about 10% of vineyards in France make the wine this way, mainly in Burgundy. And this method was introduced by Christian Prudhomme, who told us all about that. He told us lots of amazing things that even after 49 years of doing wine, I never knew. For example, you see here the barrels touch. Okay, why? Well, I asked him why, and he said because everything is vibrating molecules, and if the barrels are vibrating and the wine's vibrating and it's touching, it's talking to the wine in the other barrel, and it makes them happy. And I rolled my eyes. I thought, oh, he's 80 years old, something is going wrong. And he saw, and he said, okay, we'll do a test. We'll do a tasting out of the barrels. So we waited a month or so, and we separated one barrel completely, and then the others all touched. And the one that was separated tasted the least good, and the one that touched just on one side, the next, and the ones that were touching on both sides tasted the best. He was absolutely right. Okay, so in wine, as I explained, you can always learn. You can have 2 lifetimes and never know everything about the wine. So the white wine that we make, and we only make a maximum of 1,000 bottles in a very, very good year, is made in 1-year-old barrels from one of the most famous vineyards making sweet wine in France, in Sauternes. Well, the most famous. So you probably know then that it's Chateau Yquem. And although our white wine is a dry wine, the tastes and the aromas that the wine gets are wonderful from the 1-year-old barrels of the sweet Chateau Yquem. And that's what makes the wine also very long-lasting. So until very recently, last year, we were finishing off the last 2013 white made here in this region, which is very, very rare to have a white wine in this region that ages beautifully. And we use very few brand new barrels. We prefer to use 1-year-old barrels because wood on wine is like makeup on you lovely ladies, right? You're all beautiful and you wake up in the morning and you go to the bathroom and you put on some maquillage, some makeup, and to make yourself look more beautiful. But what happens if you put on too much? You spoil the whole effect. And it's the same with wood on wine. Okay, the wood should enhance the beauty of the wine. It shouldn't swamp the beauty. We shouldn't just taste wood. So if we have too much wood, then we spoil the whole effect, the whole beauty of the wine. So this vineyard and winery was previously owned by Gérard Depardieu, the big guy, the French actor who acted in Green Card, in Cyrano de Bergerac, in many, many movies. And at that time, it wasn't called Étalon Rouge, it was called Confiance. And you couldn't get it. And we went to a restaurant always in Bordeaux, which we loved, Petite Commerce, and they had the wine. Okay, so when I went there, whenever I drank the wine, but I also bought 12 bottles at the restaurant price to take home because I couldn't get it anywhere. Never knowing that in the end we would be having the same wonderful terroir of this vineyard, because Depardieu sold, because Mr. Holland wanted to tax him 75%, because Mr. Holland thought that that's what people who earn more than $1 million should be taxed. And he sold some of his vineyards, became a Russian citizen and lives in Belgium. Okay, so when we are finished with turning the barrels, then we take the wine out of the tanks and we take the skins that are left and we press them in the press outside. And that pressed wine is very intense. So it goes into these stainless steel tanks, and then before we bottle, we test how much of that powerful wine from the skins we are going to mix with the free run wine from the tanks. We do little experiments in little bottles, and when we decide that's the proportion of pressed to free run wine, then every bottle is made in those percentages. And we do the mixing in this big blending tank, and once the wine is blended, then we get the machine in the bottling machine, and in one morning all 6,000 bottles are done in 2 hours.
Quick question.
Please.
Okay, you can go back this way.
You said tank and you pointed to the barrel.
It's a tank.
Oh, so
That's a barrel, this is a tank.
Got it.
That's how long does it take the skins to separate from the way you do it?
6 weeks,
Okay, not
around
very
6 weeks. But it's turned every day 4 or 5 times.
long. Yeah.
Very labor intensive. So although probably Étalon is the most expensive wine of the region, there's a reason. It's hugely labor intensive. It's very limited quantity, and everything that's used, the corks, the bottles, everything is the top. Just for the corks is 9,000 euros for 6,000 bottles, €1.50 a cork. And that's without some labor costs, even that's not fully included. Yeah. Okay, so we'll come back. This building dates back to 1690. It was the stables of the Duke Saint-Simon, who was the governor of Blaye, and he lived next door. It was his house, and this was the stables for his horses and his grooms. And in the street, of course, art is very prominent because art and wine are very compatible. In fact, this is art in a bottle. So it's quite congruent that Clarissa should make wine because she's an artist and she also is a winemaker. She's making this art in the bottle. The gallery consists of the Imaginarium. This is where people can play with the art, adults and children. And upstairs is where Clarissa does her work, the studio where she works. She has become a very prominent artist with lots of collectors in USA, Canada, England, Australia, and Chateau in the region. If anybody wants to play, you can put wishes in there that all come true. You can sit in front of the mirror. I can't guarantee that you will get big breasts, but you will change if you sit in front of that mirror for 1 hour, okay? So after this, if you'd like to go upstairs and have a look at the work that Clarissa is doing, it's the tidiest studio that you've ever seen, but it's very interesting to see. Rob, here we go. Just top you up a little bit. Anybody else? Yes, Christian needs a little bit. Okay, so this is where we have some quiet tasting sometimes. There are 14 cellars down here. The doors are old elevator doors from Paris in the 1930s. So if you ever stayed in a pension or an old hotel in Paris in the 1930s, you'd have gone up in a little elevator with doors like this, and it sounded like this. Yeah. Remember the of the lift? Anyway, so here we have Je Suis. Now, Je Suis is one of my favorite wines. Je Suis is a limited edition, normally of about 1,500 bottles. And when I met this wine for the first time, I loved it very much. And the man had 700 bottles left, and I said, could I have all 700 bottles? And he said, yeah, if you pay for them, you can have them. So I did, and I did. And then I came back home, and I told Clarissa, and I said, I've found the most amazing wine. I tasted thousands of bottles of wine, and I really love this one. It's made by Remy Amos, and he's the 11th generation winemaker on this chateau, which is Chateau Grand Moulin. And it's 80% Cab Franc and 20% Merlot, which is a very unusual blend and which I love very much. So I had 700 bottles, and I thought, well, I'll have enough until I die. Somehow the next day or the day after, some client phoned and spoke to her. They wanted some wines or something, and she said, oh, Les is very happy because he found his most wonderful wine. And she said, it was Je Suis. And anyway, 2 weeks later, I only had 40 bottles left, okay, because we have a lot of clients that we are selling and shipping wine to. And so that was that. But I did it again. I bought all the bottles in 2014. He made it again. He only makes it in exceptional years. So he makes 4 wines, 3 every year. And when it's a millésime exceptionnel, when the weather is perfect, then he makes this one as well. And he uses special barrels. They don't look like those ones over there. They're stretched. They look like cigars with lots of wood on wine, more wood on wine ratio than the ordinary one. And very expensive barrels from a barrel maker, very good barrel maker in Bordeaux. And so I tasted the 14. It was just as good. And I bought all 1,500 bottles. And some of them will get sold and have been sold, but I've kept my stash down here. Nobody can touch that now, so I will have this wine until I die. And then in 2018, he did it again. But he only made 1,200 bottles because there was less quantity in 2018. And he picks every bunch by hand, the best bunches from 33 hectares. That's 88 acres. He takes the best grapes to make this particular wine. And, well, we'll taste it in a little while. Actually, we should let it breathe. Where's the opener?
In your pocket.
Okay. And we'll have a taste. But, and of course, you very seldom find a good winemaker and a good marketing person in the same man. But he's both. Because you see, the label, it's a woman's body with a glass strategically placed, and underneath it says from the Earth's own erogenous zone, la zone érogène de la Terre, terrain.
Very clever.
So he's a good marketing man with a good sense of humor and also a great winemaker. So while we're down here, I want to talk about 2 things. The one is the year of the wine in France, and the other is terroir, a word terroir. It's like terror with an I somewhere in it. And in France, the year is very important, much more important than in the New World, in South Africa or California or anywhere else. Because in France, we cannot water the vines. It's forbidden. We cannot give water to the vines here in Bordeaux, especially some places in the south of France you can, but mostly in France we cannot irrigate. So everything depends on nature. And when nature performs perfectly, then we have a millésime exceptionnel. So the rain comes at the right time, the frost, the sun. We need the frost because it kills all the bad microorganisms in the soil. And the role that nature plays is much more important, because in South Africa and California we can irrigate the vines. So it's the same more or less every year. And when it's not perfect nature but still pretty good, then we have a classically good year, and those are also good wines to buy. So excellent years, millésime exceptionnel, and classically good years, good wines to buy. Then we get difficult years. Difficult. Why difficult? Because every year the farmer has a baby, his vintage. And you never call your child bad, but you might call your child difficult. And if he says it's difficult, then you know it's a bad year, okay? And life is too short to drink bad years. So always try for the millésime exceptionnel or the classically good years. The other concept that or term that I'd like to mention is terroir, because it's a typically French word. Anglo-Saxons don't understand terroir. If you've spoken to me about terroir 35 years ago, I would have looked at you like, what? But terroir is very, very important. Terroir is not just the soil, it's the climate, it's the slope, and the winemaker, all rolled into one. And if we have a great terroir, the chances of having a great wine are very good. The best terroir, the soils, are on the 45th parallel in the world. And there's a book called The 45th Parallel, where you will see all the, well, not all, but most of the great chateaux are on the 45th parallel, whether it's in France, whether it's in South Africa, California. The 45th parallel, for some reason, is great terroir. And there's a book on all the vineyards, great vineyards who are on the 45th parallel. So the terroir, it doesn't only apply to wine, it also applies to everything that we grow. So we grow chickens, we raise chickens, for example, and chickens that are raised in, say, Brest or Toulouse taste different to chickens raised in Bordeaux because of what they're pecking, what the owner is feeding them, what the temperature is, etc. It depends, the taste of the chicken depends on the terroir. I don't know that for a fact because I don't eat chicken, okay? Because we have chickens for eggs and they're my friends, and I don't eat my friends. But I eat duck because I'm a flexitarian, okay, and I don't keep ducks, and they're not my friends. But anyway, that's just besides the point. But terroir is very, very, very important. It creates the taste of what we are growing.